Every single day, people type the same question into YouTube: how to learn English fast. Is there an actual answer to that, or is it all just marketing? What do you think, Lila?
There is an answer. I went from an intermediate level, B1, to an advanced C1 level in under a year. And no, it wasn't magic.
Welcome to Word Nerds, the podcast for intermediate learners who want to master real English. I'm Kai.
And I'm Lila. Today, we promise to give you the exact vocabulary framework to finally break through the intermediate plateau and unlock real native speech.
So, what was it then?
Honestly, for a long time, it was nothing. I was doing everything people tell you to do. I was reading, watching shows in English, and studying grammar books. But I felt completely stuck. There was no movement at all.
Let's pause there. What did stuck actually feel like? Because everyone says that, and it can mean 100 different things.
For me, it felt like this. If I understood something I was reading or watching perfectly, that told me it was too easy. It was basically beginner content, not real progress. But if I didn't understand it, I didn't want to sit through an hour of confusing conversation because it just wasn't interesting. I was trapped between too easy and too boring, and both felt like wasted time.
That is a very exact way to describe it. Most people just say, "I got bored," and leave it there.
I had a very specific way of testing it, too. You know the TV show Friends?
The show? Sure.
I used it as my personal measure. I told myself if I could understand this show without subtitles, that meant I was actually getting somewhere and progressing. So I watched it constantly, all the time. But I watched it with subtitles slowed down to 70% speed.
70%. Just to put that in perspective, native speakers usually talk at about 150 words a minute. You were listening to them at about 100 words a minute.
Exactly. And even then, it still sounded like one long word. It didn't sound like 6 people talking, it was one continuous sound, with no gaps or pauses anywhere. I was sure I knew a lot of those words, but in their mouths, at real speed, I couldn't find where one word stopped and the next started.
How long did you keep testing yourself against it?
Months. And I hit the exact same wall every time. So I stopped. I put the whole show away and decided it wasn't my actual problem. It was just something showing me the problem. The real thing was somewhere else, and I had to go find it.
Where did you end up looking?
Words. I dropped almost everything else and focused completely on vocabulary.
And we will definitely talk about how you learned those words. But first, let's go back to what you said earlier about going from B1 to C1 in under a year. That sounds exactly like an advertisement for a language app. Those apps always make big promises and then people get disappointed. Why is your story different?
Because I am not telling our listeners that it took 3 months. It took almost a whole year. And during that year, I practiced for 1 to 2 hours every single day. Honestly, a lot of it was really boring.
Let's look at the actual numbers, because they matter. Government experts who train diplomats in foreign languages have clear statistics. They say it takes about 600 to 700 hours of serious study to reach a professional level. If you study by yourself at home without a classroom, it usually takes even longer.
So, studying for a year wasn't a magic shortcut.
Exactly. If you study hard every day, 1 year is exactly what you should expect. The special part of your story isn't that you finished faster than normal. The special part is that you didn't waste any of the study hours you had.
Which is the exact opposite of YouTube videos that promise you will become fluent in 90 days.
If a video promises that, close it.
Close it immediately. Not because English is impossible to learn, but because that timeline is a lie.
So, you put all your focus on vocabulary. At what point did you try watching Friends again? Did you?
Yes, I did. After I learned about 3,000 words.
3,000 exactly? Or was that just a guess?
Just a guess. I wasn't counting every single day. I just turned on the show one afternoon, with no real plan. I was just curious to see what would happen.
And
I could actually hear the words. Not every single one of them, but it wasn't just one long noise anymore. I could clearly hear where how ended and are started. And another great thing happened. When I heard a word I didn't know, it actually stood out to my ears. It didn't just get lost in the background noise anymore.
that is an important skill. Noticing one new word inside a group of words you already know.
It became my new test, honestly. First, I watched with subtitles at a slow speed. Then I turned off the subtitles. Next, I changed it to normal speed. Eventually, I could just leave the show playing in the background, the way native speakers leave the TV on while they do other things.
Okay, I have to tell you something interesting now. And it might sound like I am making it up to be dramatic, but I promise it is true. 3,000 is the exact number. Language experts have studied thousands of hours of real spoken English conversations. They found that if you know about 3,000 core words and their variations, you can understand 95% of normal conversation.
I found that number just because of how it felt, not from a book.
Exactly. That is why it's so amazing. You found the magic number by practicing, not by reading about it first. But if you want to understand 98%, meaning you really follow the show perfectly, not just understand the general idea, you need closer to 5,000 words.
Which is exactly what I decided to do next.
5,000 words. How can a person actually learn that many words without studying all day and all night?
I made it very simple. My goal was to learn 1,000 words in 100 days, which meant 10 new words every day. I also quickly reviewed the words I already knew. Of course, I am a human, not a robot. Some days I took a break or missed a day here and there, but 10 words was always my target.
What did a study day look like for you?
It took about 2 hours. I spent 80% of the time reading dictionaries. Really. It sounds boring, but it worked incredibly well. But I always started by listening, not reading. I used an online channel called 4,000 Essential English Words. I listened to it every day while commuting or walking my dog, so I could hear the sound of the word before I ever saw how it was written in a dictionary.
What did you do after you heard the word?
Then I would read about it, where the word came from, the grammar, and how it connects to other words. I repeated the word out loud about 10 times in different phrases, or sometimes just the word by itself. I tried to sound exactly like a native speaker. Then I would listen to the same list of words again and again. I stopped the audio immediately if I couldn't remember a word's meaning, or if I couldn't use it in a sentence right away.
That is a lot of repetition before you even start using the words.
But using the words is where the real work happens. And here is the important part. I didn't write sentences down. I made sentences.
What is the difference between writing a sentence and making a sentence?
Writing a sentence is just an exercise in a book. Making a sentence is personal. I would take a new word and ask myself, how can I use this word right now, today, this exact second? I use the words to talk about my friends, my family, and myself. I use them to talk about happy times, jokes, and even very difficult or painful moments from my life. I wanted every word to feel real to me. I didn't just want to understand them when I heard them. I wanted the words in my mouth, in my head, and in my soul.
That sounds like a very intense way to learn a basic phrase like, the weather is nice.
Well, not every word needs a painful memory. Some words are just beautiful, and that is enough. Other words don't have a direct translation into my language, and that alone made them easy to remember. I started giving words their own personality. I would say to myself, this word is beautiful, this word has a story, or this word is short but special.
Did you ever try flashcards or word lists?
I tried both, and I stopped using both.
Why?
They worked a little bit, but they took too much time for the results I got back. Using apps like Quizlet was interesting for about a week, but then it became very dry and boring. It was a lot of mental effort. But, it was the wrong kind of effort, just repeating words over and over. For me, learning where a word comes from and how it connects to other words was much easier, and it stayed in my head longer.
There is actually a scientific name for that. Scientists call it the self-reference effect.
The self-reference effect? What is that?
It just means that when information is connected to you, your own memories, and the people you love, your brain remembers it much better than information that doesn't matter to you. So when you used a new word to talk about your mother or a difficult moment in your life, you weren't just being emotional. You were using one of the strongest memory tools in the world.
I didn't know it had a scientific name. I just knew that flashcards felt like nothing was happening. And when you forget a word, it means you have to learn it all over again. The time you already spent is gone. And you have to spend that time a second time.
Exactly. Forgetting isn't free. It steals your future time because you have to pay for that word twice.
So I fought hard against forgetting. Sometimes I would connect a new English word to a word that sounded similar, just to make it stick. For example, the English word stew sounded like the name Steve, or the word effort sounded like the car brand Ford. I just used whatever popped into my head first.
That has a name too. It's called the keyword method, and experts have been studying it since the 1970s.
I just wanted to be able to use every single word, not just understand it when I saw it. I was greedy about words, like the cartoon character Scrooge McDuck diving straight into his big room of gold coins. My gold was active words. Understanding a word deeply is step 1. Using it is step 2. If you skip either step, the word disappears.
I have been thinking about something you said earlier. You mentioned that you always listen to a new word before you ever see it written down. That is the complete opposite of how most people learn vocabulary. Why do you do it that way?
Because I made a big mistake when I first started. And it forced me to waste a lot of time relearning things later. So I began learning English in Ukraine. It was a good course with truly good teachers, but I was practicing my English with other students who spoke the same native language as me. We all pronounced English words the exact same incorrect way. We spoke very clearly, separating every single sound, because that is how our own language works.
So the way people talked in the classroom didn't match how people talk in the real world.
Not even close. I learned words from textbooks, grammar exercises, and classmates who sounded exactly like me. I never listened to actual native speakers talking at a normal speed. Because of that, the sound of the word in my head and the way my mouth tried to say it was just wrong. I basically expected the rest of the world to speak English the way I did, but it doesn't work that way.
So you had to spend time relearning words you thought you already knew.
Yes, exactly. And it happened with simple words, too. I am not talking about advanced vocabulary. I mean basic, everyday words. That is what pushed me to create a strict rule for myself. Always get the sound of a new word from a native speaker first, just like a child does. Children don't learn to speak from a textbook. They hear a sound and they copy it over and over until it sounds exactly the same. I started treating every single new word that way. Hear it, match the sound, then read about it.
That is fascinating. I had the exact opposite problem when I was learning a foreign language. For me, learning vocabulary was the easy part.
Really? How is that possible?
It was, because many words look and sound almost exactly the same in Spanish and English. They come from the same history. For example, nation is nación, and important is importante. Once I noticed that pattern, it felt like I already knew thousands of words before I even started studying.
Ukrainian and Russian don't give you that easy shortcut when you learn English. We have a few words that are similar, but they still sound completely different when you say them out loud.
Right. So your biggest problem was learning the actual sounds of the words. My problem was the grammar. Changing verbs in Spanish is much more complicated than it is in English. No matter how many similar words I knew, I still had to sit down and learn the grammar rules.
So we had to solve two completely different problems.
Yes, but we used the same basic ideas. I just had to spend more of my hours practicing grammar patterns and less time on vocabulary. Learning words was cheap and easy for me, but it was expensive and required a lot of hard work for you.
That is actually how the other 20% of my study time was spent, on grammar, exercises, reading, speaking, and watching videos. It was only 20% of my time, but it was still very important.
How did it help you?
Because once I recognized a grammar pattern, I didn't have to stop and figure it out every time I heard it. Translating actually helped me here, even though many people say translating is an old-fashioned way to learn. But the trick is that I didn't translate word by word. I translated in groups of words.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Instead of memorizing a difficult rule like would have told, I would translate a whole sentence. I would look at the sentence and see exactly how the English structure was different from my native language. And then I moved on. You don't need to memorize a pattern. You just need to understand it once. A grammar pattern is going to show up in conversations over and over again, far more often than any single vocabulary word will.
So you basically used your vocabulary method for grammar, too.
Yes, I did. It is a bit harder because a pattern is not as simple as a single word. But once you see the whole shape of it, your brain does the rest of the work. The human brain naturally wants to find patterns. It puts the pieces together on its own. If you just give it one clear example.
Oh, yes. Our brains are professionals at it.
It's strange hearing all this explained, with official scientific names and studies. At the time, I had no idea any of it was proven anywhere. I just noticed what worked for me, and I did more of that.
That is the best part. But if you were starting today with all the new technology we have now, what would you change?
Honestly, probably nothing about the core method, but it might have gone faster.
I agree. There are 3 honest additions we can make to your method today, using modern tools. First, think about how you decide when to review an old word. You did that by feel, quickly going back through your lists until the word stuck. Today, there are smart flashcard apps, like one called FSRS. It uses a smart system to calculate exactly when your brain is about to forget a word. It shows you the word right before it fades, which means you have to do 20 to 30% fewer reviews to keep the words in your head. So it doesn't change how you learn the word. It just tells you exactly when to look at it again.
Wow, that would have saved me a lot of real time.
Second is the pronunciation problem. Today, we have excellent voice recognition apps. You can say a word in your phone, and the app tells you exactly what part of your pronunciation is off compared to a native speaker. Studies show this gives a solid improvement because you get an answer right away, instead of finding out about your mistake years later in the middle of a real conversation.
I definitely found out the hard way more than once.
And third, making personal sentences. I think creating these yourself is still the absolute best way, because it works precisely because it is yours. But if you want to practice more, there are AI conversation partners available at any time. They can look at a sentence you just made up and tell you right away if it sounds natural to a native speaker. A recent 12-week study showed that learners who practiced this way made real improvements in their fluency and pronunciation.
So none of this new technology replaces the actual method.
Exactly. It doesn't replace it. It just makes the process smoother and removes the frustration. You already did the hardest part, figuring out what actually matters. So, if someone is listening to us right now and wants the short version, what should they actually do tomorrow morning?
Start with 10 words a day. Get their sounds from real native speech first. Always listen before you look up a word in a dictionary. Use each new word in a sentence about your own life on the exact same day you learn it. And finally, don't just trust your brain to remember them. Use a system to review them before you forget, so you don't have to waste time learning them twice.
Learn 10 words a day, hear the native sound first, make them personal, same day, don't let them fade.
Exactly. And test yourself against something real. The way I tested myself against the show Friends. Pick a show, a podcast, or a person. Notice what you miss. Come back later and notice how much more you catch.
And if our listeners want a specific place to start tomorrow, Where should they go?
The Oxford 5000 is a wonderful word list. It organizes words by how useful they actually are in real life. And 4000 Essential English, the channel I talked about earlier, is where I did most of my daily listening.
And what about your own show, Word Fluency?
Honestly, we are still building our own library of words here. We don't have enough content yet to be your only resource. But if you want to learn English alongside us while we build it, you are always welcome.
So give it a try today. Just 10 words, catch the native sound first, and see how it feels.
You've got this. Take care, keep practicing, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.